Hello students, Assalamu alaikum. मी MurshidaMahbuba, Senior Lecturer, Biology Department, Milestone College. Welcome you all to our online biology class. From Biology First Paper, Chapter 10, Plant Reproduction, our today's topic is what is fertilization, mechanism of fertilization, double fertilization, results of fertilization, and importance of fertilization. Definition of fertilization: union of male gamete with the female gamete in sexual reproduction is known as fertilization. Fertilization is a complex and continuous process. Fertilization in flowering plants was discovered by Strasburger in 1884. Mechanism of fertilization in plant. At first, we have to know the flower pairs. Thalamus or receptacle provide the attachment place of the different floral whorls. Sepals are the outermost whorl. They protect the flower during the bud stage. Petals are generally brightly colored to attract insects for pollination. Anther and filament make the male reproductive part of the flower known as stamen. Stigma, style, and ovary make the female reproductive part called the pistil. In the ovary, there are ovules. In an ovule, have an embryo sac, and in the embryo sac, have an egg. During pollination, the pollen grain comes to the stigma. The pollen grain has two layers. The outer layer is called axile and the inner layer is called intine. At some places, axine is thin. These areas are known as germ pores, through which the pollen grains comes out. Pollen grain has two nucleus. The smaller nucleus is called generative nucleus and the larger nucleus is called tube nucleus. Generally, this binucleated condition, pollination, takes place. Generative cell, which will divide to form two male gametes, and the tube nucleus makes the pollen tube. The pollen tube gradually grows down through the style and enters into the embryo sac of the ovule through the microbyle. If the pollen tube enters into the embryo sac through the micropyle, then this process is called porogamy. And if the pollen tube enters into the embryo sac through chalaza, then this process is called chalazogamy. And if the pollen tube enters into the embryo sac through integument, then this process is called mesogamy. The embryo sac has three cells towards chalaza. These cells are known as antipodals. There are two nuclei in the middle called the polar nuclei. Three cells are towards the micropyle. The middle larger cell is known as egg and the small cells are called the synergids. The egg and the two synergids would form the egg apparatus. The pollen tube penetrates the embryo sac between the egg and the synergid. The tip of the pollen tube braces to liberate the two gametes near the egg cell. The first gamete fuses with the egg to form diploid zygote. This process is called fertilization. The second male gamete fuses with the two polar nuclei to form endosperm nucleus. The fusion of three nuclei is called triple fusion. The process of fertilization and triple fusion together is called double fertilization. Okay, we want to review it again. Description of fertilization process. The pollen grain germinates after the carpel is pollinated. The pollen grain enlarges by absorbing moisture from the anther. It ruptures and in time grows through the germ pore into a tube called pollen tube. The pollen tube gradually grows down through the style and enters into the embryo sac through the micropyle. In some plants, pollen tube enters to the egg through calaza. By this time, the generative nucleus divides into two male gametes by mitosis cell division. Then the apex of pollen tube ruptures, releasing male gamete to the embryo sac. One of the male gamete fertilized with the egg is known as fertilization. The other male gamete fuses with the secondary nuclei. This type of fusion is called triple fusion. Fusion of male gamete with the egg is called fertilization. At the same time, the fusion of other male gamete with secondary nucleus is known as double fertilization. Okay, difference between fertilization and double fertilization. Union of male gamete with female gamete is fertilization, and one male gamete fuses with female gamete to form zygote, and at the same time another male gamete fuses with secondary nucleus is called double fertilization. Through this process zygote is developed, and through this process endosperm is developed. It occurs in all angiosperms and gymnosperms. It occurs only in all angiosperms. It doesn't occur in gymnosperm. Results of fertilization. The fertilized egg or zygote is the first cell of sporophyte. This zygote makes a thick wall around itself and remain dormant for a period of time. At the end of dormant period, by the mitotic cell division, an embryo is formed. After fertilization, ovule undergoes cell division and gradually develops into seed. The integument of the ovule are converted into two seed coat. Outer coat of seed is termed as testa, and inner seed coat is termed as tegment. After triple fusion, the endosperm nucleus is produced. This endosperm nucleus also goes through a series of division to form a mass of endosperm cell. It provides nutrition of the embryo in the form of starch, though it can also contain oils and proteins. In most angiosperms, nucellus tissue of seed absorbed by embryo, but in some cases this tissue remain as perisperm outer the endosperm. In most of the plant, the antipodals and synergies disintegrated. Ovule stalk transformed into seed stalk. In some cases, the ovule stalk evolved as a specialized soggy extra outgrowth that partly or completely covers the seed. This outgrowth is called as aril. The edible flesh of the lychee fruit are highly developed arils surrounding the seed. Funicle, hilum, micropyle transformed into seed placenta, hilum, seed pore. During transformation after fertilization, the other parts of flower, for example sepals, petals, stamens, stigma, style, are dried up. The ovary of the carpel by the influence of hormones transformed into fruit. Antipodal synergies are damaged. Nucellus become perisperm or damaged. Ovule pore becomes seed pore. Significance or importance of fertilization. As a result of fertilization, the ovule which are located inside the ovary transformed into seed and the ovary transformed into fruit. Seed is the main source of new progeny. If seeds would not have formed, most of the flowering plants would have been extinct. Not also that all the animals, including human, are completely dependent on the plant for food. It restores the diploid condition by fusion of haploid male and female gamete. It results in the formation of triploid primary endosperm nucleus which develops into endosperm in the seed. It provides nourishment to the developing embryo. It brings about recombination of characters resulting in variation among the offspring. Okay, your homework: definition of fertilization, triple fusion, double fertilization, synergies, syngamy, antipodal cell, egg apparatus, and one difference between fertilization and double fertilization. Number 3, draw a label diagram of fertilization process, and number 4, describe the fertilization process. Thank you to stay with us. I hope you all submit your homework properly.